Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a two-game Major League Baseball slate for baseball. I'm going to look at DraftKings and FanDuel stuff today for prices and stuff like that, so I can give you a good rundown for both sites. I'll also give you the odds picks for DraftKings Sportsbook, so we can look at that as well. Before I get started though, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. Now, I'm also going to give you a strategy tip that I do sometimes for baseball when there's just two games. And what you'll see here is that I've got six lineups, and each one of them has a different pairing of pitchers. I think all the four pitchers are pretty even today when it comes to their metrics, so I think this is a good strategy today. And then I throw these lineups in different things, and hopefully get a couple that cash. And so let's go ahead and get into this slate here. So we do have four pitchers: Zach Wheeler, Zach Gallen, Max Fried, and Bobby Miller. So this slate is very interesting here. Philly versus Atlanta and Arizona versus the Dodgers. Obviously, Atlanta and the Dodgers are going to be the stackable teams when it comes to the favorites, and those are going to be very chalky today to stack those two teams. But there are also players on Arizona and Philadelphia that are interesting today. Let's talk about our pitchers first. So Wheeler's pitched against Atlanta three times this season. He's averaged 22 fantasy points a game. He's also averaged 21 fantasy points a game over the last 10 games. He's had 65 strikeouts in the last 10, and he's given up 6 home runs. Versus Atlanta, he has given up 4 home runs in his 3 games, but he has had 21 strikeouts, which is pretty solid. As for Zach Gallen against the Dodgers, he's had 2 games against them. Both games were pretty bad. He's averaged 4 fantasy points in between the 2 games. He also only had 10 strikeouts, which is 5 per game, and he gave up 4 home runs as well. He is averaging 18 fantasy points a game over the last 10, and he's had almost 60 strikeouts with 7 home runs in that stretch. I do think that he's probably the most inconsistent pitcher available for this slate, and so he's pretty risky. Now, Max Fried has not played for a couple of days. He's had a few games off due to injuries and stuff like that, and he hadn't played all season, consistently. But he's only had 1 game against Philly this season. He did have 17 fantasy points against them. He had 6 strikeouts in that game and had 1 home run given up. He's averaged 19 fantasy points over the last 10 that he's played, and he's had 62 strikeouts during that stretch with 7 home runs. He's been a little bit more inconsistent, but he's definitely a capable pitcher in this situation. And then for Bobby Miller for the Dodgers against Arizona, he's had 2 games. He's averaged 14 fantasy points a game. He's had 8 strikeouts in those 2 games, and he's had given up 1 home run. He's also been 19 fantasy points per game over the last 10, and he's had 57 strikeouts and 6 home runs given up in that stretch. So I think he's a viable pitcher, but he's also a little bit risky. Just based on these metrics, I would say Wheeler and Fried are the best options. But I also think that Miller has some good upside, as he's probably got the best matchup straight up. And Fried has some utility here, though he's a little bit risky due to his injury situation and stuff like that. So let's get into the teams themselves, and I'm going to give you kind of the stackable players for each website here. So for Philadelphia, obviously Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber have both been have home run upside. Alec Boom has hit the ball pretty well lately, and so has JT Realmuto. I do like Realmuto's price on FanDuel a lot better, as much as Boom's is as well. Obviously, guys are a little bit cheaper from the top to bottom, but anything under $3,500 for value plays is good, and having Realmuto at $3,100 is a pretty good deal. But you can stack this team very well because of the way they're priced pretty fairly on DraftKings as well. Moving into Atlanta, obviously Acuna and Ozuna are hitting the ball extremely well lately. Acuna is very expensive, and he's going to be expensive on both sites, but he is a viable option today. He does have a lot of home run potential. Ozuna also has a lot of home run upside. He's hit a bunch recently, which definitely gives him some utility. Sean Murphy has been very inconsistent lately, but he draws great metrics for this matchup. I do like him more on FanDuel than on DraftKings because you could put him in the catcher slash first base spot or in utility at that price point, though he's not necessary on the slate, but he is cheap and gives you some value opportunity from Atlanta, which is kind of hard to get sometimes. Matt Olson does spill a little bit overpriced on DraftKings, but obviously he's hitting a lot of home runs lately. On FanDuel, he's actually fairly priced, which is nice, and so he's definitely rosterable there. Austin Riley has not hit the ball quite as well as I'd like him lately, but he is capable of a good game, and he is a little bit pricey on DraftKings and on FanDuel for what he's been doing, but he is capable and is a good option if you do stack Atlanta. Michael Harris is nice and underpriced on FanDuel, which I really like the $3,000 price range for him. At 3,800, that's still not bad, but I do think he's a viable option on DraftKings as well. Ozzy Albies is gonna be hard to roster today at being 5,100 bucks, but he is capable of play. If I was gonna take two guys out of the lineup, out of the Atlanta Braves plays that I probably would pass on today, Sean Murphy and Ozzy Albies are gonna be the two. If you want to put five guys into your lineups, but you may have to pass on Acuna based on his price in some aspects. So Ozzy is a little bit more favorable on FanDuel with his price being cheaper. Looking at Arizona, we're going to look at Tommy Pham first. Now, he has the best metrics for this slate, and he's nice and cheap on both sides, so he's a very good value play. Regardless of who you choose your pitchers, you can throw him in there as kind of a one-off for Arizona if you don't want to stack them. But Corbin Carroll is in play as well, though he's a little bit easier to roster on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, as he's fairly expensive here. But he's a good contrarian play off of Acuna if you want to go that route. Christian Walker and Ketel Marte are both very similarly priced on both sites. I do like Christian Walker a little bit better on DraftKings, and I like Marte a little bit better on FanDuel since they're a little bit cheaper on both that way. But both guys have some utility here, and they're not overpriced and have good utility if you think that Arizona can win this game. Looking at the Dodgers, Mookie Betts has been somewhat inconsistent since he's been back from injuries and stuff like that, so I'm not really convinced that he's going to have a huge game. I do like Freddie Freeman a lot, and I do think he has a lot of home run potential today. But he's nice. He's a lot cheaper on FanDuel. He's a little bit cheaper than some of the other big plays are on FanDuel, which gives him some upside. But he's similar price to Matt Olson, so you could kind of go with either one of those guys today. As for JD Martinez and Max Muncy, I like Martinez quite a bit. I'm not a big fan of Max Muncy a lot of times because he tends to be burn or bust, but he is capable of a home run. And Will Smith has been inconsistent lately. He's a little bit pricey for a catcher, considering the fact you can get Sean Murphy or JT Realmuto for a little bit cheaper. So I do think he's viable if you go with the Dodgers stack, then Will Smith's in play. But if you are just trying to get one-offs from the Dodgers, I think Freddie Freeman and JD Martinez are the best. And then we'll look at the odds here. So Philly and Atlanta. Atlanta has -1.5 odds and over under of 8, and the Dodgers have a -1.5 for the Dodgers and over under at 8.5. I think these odds are going to be pretty tight. I think these two games rather are going to be pretty tight. So if you want to take the money line for Atlanta and the Dodgers, I definitely like that a little bit better. But I could also say giving Philly and Arizona 1.5 runs is definitely favorable. I also think both these over unders are going to be low, and I think they're both going to be over 8. So I think that now 8.5. So you're going to have to get 9 there, and you're going to need 8 or more to pay off here. Of course, if you get 8 exactly, that will be a draw. But you're going to have to get 9 in both games. But I think both games are going to be over 8 runs. So I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. Even though pitching is pretty solid, all four teams have a lot of capability in this slate, as they all have a bunch of good bats that are going to have some nice upside today. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.